The police sirens were getting louder. I stood in my backyard watching 3 squad cars pull into my driveway, their red and blue lights painting my house like a crime scene. My elderly mother was still sitting at the patio table, her birthday cake half-eaten, looking terrified and confused. 20 family members stared at me with wide eyes, wondering what horrible thing I had done to bring the police to our peaceful gathering. But I knew exactly why they were here. Karen from 2 houses down had finally done it. She had called 911 about my swimming pool. Yes, you heard that right. My completely legal, fully permitted, beautiful backyard pool that my wife and I had saved 10 years to build. Karen had just reported it as a public safety emergency because I refused to tear it down to make her happy. As the officers approached my back gate, I felt my hands shake with pure rage. This woman had been harassing my family for months, but this was different. This was war. What Karen did not know was that my wife is not just any wife. She is a municipal attorney who specializes in property law and civil rights violations. And Karen had just made the biggest mistake of her miserable life. Let me take you back to where this nightmare started. 5 years ago, my wife Sarah and I bought our dream house in Meadowbrook Estates, a quiet suburban neighborhood with tree-lined streets and manicured lawns. We had worked our tails off for this moment. I spent 10 years doing double shifts at the manufacturing plant, and Sarah worked evenings and weekends building her law practice. We saved every penny, skipped vacations, and drove our old cars until the wheels fell off. The house was perfect except for one thing. The backyard was a disaster. The previous owners had let it go completely. Dead grass, a broken fence, and a concrete slab where an old shed used to be. But Sarah and I could see the potential. We spent our first year planning the most beautiful outdoor space we could imagine. We wanted a pool. Not just any pool, but a custom-designed oasis where our family could make memories for decades. Sarah researched every city ordinance, every HOA rule, and every building code. She filed 17 different permits with the city, county, and homeowners association. She hired licensed contractors, got engineering reports, and even had the fire department inspect our access points. The construction took 4 months. Every morning before work, I would walk outside and watch our dream taking shape. The excavation crew dug the perfect rectangle in our backyard. The concrete specialists poured the most beautiful curved edges. The tile installers created a mosaic that looked like ocean waves. Sarah chose every detail, from the waterfall feature to the LED lighting system that made the water glow like liquid sapphire at night. When it was finally complete, I cried. I stood in my backyard and cried tears of joy. This was everything we had worked for. The pool was regulation size, with proper fencing, safety covers, and chemical systems. It met every single requirement in the book, and then some. The city inspector gave us a perfect score. The HOA Architectural Committee approved it unanimously. Our first pool party was magical. My parents came over, and my dad, who had worked construction his entire life, told me he had never seen anything more beautiful. Sarah's sister brought her kids, and watching them splash in our pool while we grilled burgers and watched the sunset, I felt like the luckiest man alive. For 2 years, life was perfect. We hosted birthday parties, anniversary celebrations, and summer barbecues. The neighbors would walk by and compliment our landscaping. The pool became the heart of our home, the place where we unwound after long days and celebrated every milestone. But there was something else growing in our neighborhood during those perfect years, something dark and twisted that would eventually destroy our peace. Her name was Karen Mitchell, and she lived 2 houses down from us. At first, she seemed like any other neighbor. She would wave when we passed on the street, and she even complimented Sarah's flowers during our first spring. But Karen was not like other neighbors. Karen was watching. Karen was measuring. Karen was taking notes. And Karen was slowly going insane with the need to control everything and everyone around her. Karen Mitchell was 53 years old, divorced, and had nothing better to do than police our neighborhood like a prison warden. She had been elected to the HOA board 3 years earlier, and she took that volunteer position more seriously than most people take their actual jobs. Karen had transformed herself into the self-appointed guardian of property values, armed with a measuring tape, a digital camera, and an attitude that could curdle milk. Every morning at exactly 7 o'clock, Karen would begin her patrol. She walked the same route through our neighborhood, clipboard in hand, looking for violations. Grass too high. Karen measured it. Garbage cans out 5 minutes early. Karen photographed them. Holiday decorations up 1 day past the HOA deadline. Karen documented everything and filed formal complaints. The woman was relentless. She had already driven 3 families out of the neighborhood with her harassment. The Johnsons moved after Karen reported them for having a vegetable garden that was supposedly 2 inches too close to the property line. The Martinez family sold their house after Karen filed 17 separate complaints about their teenage son's basketball hoop. The elderly couple on Elm Street packed up and moved to a retirement community after Karen called the city about their bird feeder being a nuisance that attracts rodents. But Karen's obsession with my pool was different. It was personal. It was consuming her every waking moment. I think it started because our pool was visible from the street if you stood at exactly the right angle near the corner mailbox. Most people would have to crane their necks and squint to even see it through our privacy fence, but Karen had been doing exactly that every single day. The first confrontation happened on a Saturday morning in early June. I was skimming leaves from the pool when I heard the back gate creak open. I turned around and there she was, standing in my backyard without permission, wearing a lime green tracksuit and carrying a folder thick enough to choke a horse. "We need to talk," she said, marching across my patio like she owned the place. I was so shocked by her boldness that I just stood there holding my pool skimmer like an idiot. "Excuse me." "Your pool is a problem," Karen announced, opening her folder and pulling out photographs. "It is visible from the street, which violates the community aesthetic standards. You need to install privacy screening around the entire perimeter immediately." I looked at the photos she was shoving in my face. She had spent considerable time positioning herself at various angles around the neighborhood, trying to capture glimpses of my pool through the trees and fencing. Some of the photos were taken from inside other people's yards. Some were taken from the middle of the street with a telephoto lens. "Karen, the pool meets all HOA requirements," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "We got approval from the architectural committee before we built it." "The committee made a mistake," she snapped. "I am filing a formal complaint to have their decision overturned. Until this is resolved, you need to stop using the pool immediately." I felt my blood pressure rising. This woman was standing in my backyard, on my property, demanding that I stop using the pool that Sarah and I had saved 10 years to build. The pool that had been legally approved by every authority that mattered. "I am not stopping anything," I said firmly. "This pool is legal and you are trespassing on my property. I need you to leave right now." Karen's face turned the color of a ripe tomato. "You have no idea who you are dealing with," she hissed. "I have been protecting property values in this neighborhood for years. I will not let some newcomer destroy everything we have built here." "Get out of my yard," I said, pointing toward the gate. As she stomped away, Karen turned back and gave me a look that made my skin crawl. "This is not over," she said. "Not even close." I stood there watching her disappear around the corner, holding my pool skimmer and trying to process what had just happened. Sarah came outside and found me standing there like a statue. "What is wrong?" she asked, immediately sensing the tension. I told her everything. About Corinne trespassing, about the photos, about her demands that we stop using our pool. Sarah listened quietly, her lawyer brain already working on the problem. "She cannot do any of this," Sarah said calmly. "She has no authority to override an approved architectural decision, and she definitely cannot demand that we stop using our legal pool." But I could see the concern in Sarah's eyes. We both knew that, legal or not, Corinne was going to make our lives hell. Corinne's war against our pool began the very next Monday. At exactly 8 in the morning, I was getting ready for work when I saw her car parked across the street from our house. She was sitting behind the wheel with a camera, pointing it directly at our backyard. When I walked outside to get the newspaper, she quickly started the engine and drove away. This became her routine. Every morning, every evening, sometimes during lunch breaks, Corinne would position herself somewhere in the neighborhood with a clear line of sight to our property. She photographed everything. Me swimming laps. Sarah is reading by the pool. Our friends are coming over for dinner. She documented every moment of our lives like a private investigator building a case. The harassment escalated quickly. 3 days after our first confrontation, I received a certified letter from the City Code Enforcement Office. Someone had filed a complaint claiming that our pool was built without proper permits. I had to take time off work to meet with the inspector and show him all of our documentation. He spent 2 hours examining every aspect of our pool, comparing it to the approved plans, and measuring everything twice. "Whoever filed this complaint wasted everyone's time," the inspector told me as he packed up his equipment. "This is one of the most properly built pools I have ever seen. Every permit is in order, every measurement is perfect, and the safety features exceed current standards." 2 weeks later, I got another letter, this time from the county health department. An anonymous complaint alleged that our pool was a breeding ground for mosquitoes and posed a public health risk. Another inspector came out, tested our water chemistry, examined our filtration system, and found absolutely nothing wrong. "Your pool is cleaner than most public pools," the health inspector said. "Whoever called this in has no idea what they are talking about." The third complaint came from the fire department. Someone had reported that our pool blocked emergency access to neighboring properties. The fire chief himself came out to investigate, walked around our entire property, and confirmed that our pool was positioned exactly where the approved plans indicated and created no access issues whatsoever. "This is harassment," he told me directly. "Someone is abusing the complaint system to hassle you folks." Each inspection costs us time and money. I had to take time off work, Sarah had to reschedule client meetings, and we had to pay additional fees for some of the inspections. But more than the financial cost, the constant scrutiny was destroying our peace of mind. We felt like we were living under surveillance, afraid to use our backyard because we knew Corinne was somewhere out there, watching and waiting for something to complain about. Meanwhile, Corinne was busy recruiting allies. She started attending every HOA meeting, bringing printed photographs of our pool and arguing that it was destroying the neighborhood's character. She created a petition demanding that the architectural committee reverse its approval. She went door to door, trying to convince other neighbors that our pool was somehow dangerous or inappropriate. Most of our neighbors were reasonable people who told Corinne to leave them alone, but she found a few supporters among the most obsessive homeowners in the development. Mrs. Henderson from Oak Street, who had once called the police on a child for riding his bicycle on the sidewalk. Mr. Peterson from Pine Avenue measured his grass with a ruler every morning. These people joined Corinne's crusade with the enthusiasm of religious converts. Sarah tried to handle the situation diplomatically at first. She attended HOA meetings and calmly presented our case, showing all of our permits and approvals. She explained the legal requirements for pool construction and demonstrated that we had exceeded every single one. She even offered to plant additional landscaping if anyone had legitimate concerns about visibility. "We want to be good neighbors," Sarah said at one particularly heated meeting. "We followed every rule, got every permit, and built something beautiful that adds value to our community. We are open to reasonable discussions about any legitimate concerns." But Corinne was not interested in reasonable discussions. At that same meeting, she stood up and pointed an accusing finger at Sarah. "These people think they can do whatever they want because they have money," Corinne shouted. "They moved into our neighborhood and immediately started changing things without regard for the rest of us. That pool is an eyesore and a safety hazard, and I will not rest until it is removed." The room went silent. Even Corinne's supporters looked uncomfortable with her outburst. Sarah remained calm, but I could see the fire in her eyes. After the meeting, as we walked to our car, Sarah was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "She just made a very big mistake," Sarah said softly. "I was trying to handle this diplomatically, but Corinne does not want a diplomatic solution." I did not know it at the time, but that was the moment Sarah stopped being a patient neighbor and started being a lawyer preparing for war. The breaking point came on a beautiful Saturday in August. We were hosting a pool party for my mother's 70th birthday. 20 family members had driven from 3 different states to celebrate with us. My elderly aunts and uncles were sitting in the shade, watching their grandchildren splash in the pool. Sarah had spent days preparing food, decorating the patio, and making sure everything was perfect for Mom's special day. The party was in full swing when Corinne made her move. I was at the grill, flipping burgers and laughing with my cousins, when I noticed her car parked at the end of our driveway. She was not even trying to hide anymore. She was sitting there in broad daylight, taking photographs of our guests, our food, our celebration. I walked over to her car and tapped on the window. "Corinne, you need to leave. This is a private family gathering." She rolled down the window just enough to speak. "I am on a public street. I can park anywhere I want." "You are harassing my family on my mother's birthday," I said, trying to keep my voice low so the kids would not hear. "Please just go home and let us enjoy this day." Corinne smiled. It was the most evil smile I have ever seen in my life. "Your little party is about to be over," she said, and rolled up her window. I walked back to the grill, feeling uneasy but not sure what she meant. 15 minutes later, I found out. The first police car arrived with sirens blaring, followed by a second, then a third. 3 squad cars pulled into our driveway with their emergency lights flashing like we were hosting a drug raid instead of a birthday party. The entire neighborhood came outside to see what was happening. Children stopped playing and stared at the police cars. My elderly relatives looked terrified and confused. Sarah was standing by the pool with a spatula in her hand, trying to figure out why our backyard had suddenly become a crime scene. 2 officers approached me with serious expressions. "Are you the homeowner?" one of them asked. "Yes, sir. What is this about?" "We received a 911 call about an illegal structure and public safety hazard on this property. The caller claimed there was an unpermitted swimming pool that posed an immediate danger to the community." I felt my world tilt sideways. "Our pool? Officer, this pool has every permit required by law. We have all the documentation inside if you need to see it. The lead officer looked around at our legal pool, our legal party, and our legal backyard. Sir, this looks like a normal pool party to me. Are you sure about this complaint? I am sure this is harassment, I said, pointing toward Corinne's car. That woman has been filing false complaints about our pool for months. She called 911 to disrupt my mother's birthday party. The officer looked where I was pointing and saw Corinne sitting in her car, still taking pictures of the scene she had created. He walked over to speak with her while the other officers examined our pool area and spoke with Sarah about our permits. What happened next was both satisfying and horrifying. I watched the officer's expression change as he talked to Corinne. His posture became more rigid, and his voice became more stern. Even from a distance, I could see that Corinne was not making a good impression. The officer returned to where I was standing with a look of disgust on his face. Mr. Johnson, I want to apologize for this disruption. The person who called 911 has admitted that your pool is fully permitted and legal. She called emergency services because she, and I quote, wants that monstrosity removed from the neighborhood. She admitted that, I asked, incredulous. Yes, sir. She also stated that she intends to call 911 every single day until your pool is removed, regardless of its legal status. My blood went cold. Corinne had just threatened to abuse emergency services daily, tying up police resources and potentially preventing them from responding to real emergencies. And she had done it in front of 3 police officers. Officer, what happens to people who abuse 911 like that? I asked. It is a serious crime, he replied. Misuse of emergency services can result in fines up to $5,000 and up to 1 year in jail. Making false reports is a separate charge. As the police cars finally left our driveway, the birthday party was ruined. My mother was shaken and upset. The children were scared and confused. Several relatives decided to leave early rather than risk being involved in whatever was happening between us and our crazy neighbor. But the worst part was Corinne's reaction to the whole thing. As the last police car pulled away, she got out of her car and walked to the edge of our property. With my entire family watching, she cupped her hands around her mouth and shouted loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. This is not over. I will call 911 every single day until that pool is gone. Every single day. My elderly mother grabbed my arm. Who is that woman? She whispered. Why does she hate us so much? I had no answer for her. I had never experienced anything like this level of pure malice from another human being. But as I watched Corinne march back to her house, I saw Sarah pull out her phone and start recording. She had captured Corinne's threat on video, and I could see the wheels turning in her legal mind. That night, after all the guests had gone home, and we were cleaning up the aftermath of our ruined celebration, Sarah sat me down at the kitchen table. Corinne has no idea what she just did, Sarah said quietly. She threatened to commit crimes in front of police officers. She disrupted a private gathering with false emergency reports, and she did it all while I was recording. What does that mean? I asked. Sarah looked at me with the same expression she wore when preparing for her most important cases. It means Corinne just declared war on the wrong family. The morning after my mother's ruined birthday party, I woke up to find Sarah already at the kitchen table, surrounded by folders, legal pads, and her laptop. She had been awake since 5 in the morning, and she was in full attorney mode. Coffee? I asked, still trying to process everything that had happened the day before. Already had 3 cups, Sarah replied without looking up from her work. Sit down, I need to show you something. Sarah opened the largest folder and spread its contents across the table. I stared in amazement at what appeared to be a complete dossier on Corinne Mitchell's harassment campaign. There were photographs, printed emails, copies of every false complaint she had filed, witness statements from neighbors, and even a detailed timeline of every interaction we had with her. "How long have you been collecting all this?" I asked. "Since the day she first trespassed in our backyard," Sarah said. "I knew she was going to escalate, so I started documenting everything. Every photograph she took, every complaint she filed, every time she parked outside our house to surveil us. I have been building a case for months." I picked up one of the folders and flipped through it. Sarah had documented Corinne's behavior with the precision of a federal investigator. She had photographs of Corinne taking photographs of us. She had recorded phone calls with city inspectors confirming that Corinne's complaints were baseless. She had even obtained copies of Corinne's previous harassment campaigns against other neighbors. "Look at this," Sarah said, pointing to a thick stack of papers. "Corinne has filed 63 separate complaints with various government agencies in the past 2 years. 63. The city attorney's office has flagged her as a chronic complainer who abuses municipal resources." "I had no idea you were doing all this," I said, feeling a mixture of admiration and amazement at my wife's thoroughness. "I did not tell you because I wanted to see how far she would go," Sarah explained. "If I had acted too early, Corinne could have claimed she was just a concerned neighbor. But now she has crossed lines that cannot be uncrossed." Sarah opened her laptop and showed me a video file. It was security footage from our neighbor's doorbell camera, showing Corinne trespassing on 3 different properties to take photographs of our pool. The timestamp showed she had done this repeatedly over several weeks. "She has committed criminal trespass multiple times," Sarah said, "but that is nothing compared to what she did yesterday." Sarah played the recording she had made during the police incident. Corinne's voice was crystal clear as she threatened to call 911 every day until our pool was removed. The recording also captured her admitting to the police officer that she knew our pool was legal but wanted it removed anyway. "This is evidence of conspiracy to commit misuse of emergency services," Sarah explained. "She planned this false report, and she threatened to continue committing the same crime repeatedly. The district attorney takes this kind of thing very seriously." I was starting to understand the magnitude of Corinne's legal problems, but Sarah was not finished. She opened another folder filled with financial documents. "Here is where it gets really interesting," Sarah said with a slight smile. "I have been calculating the cost of Corinne's harassment campaign. She has wasted approximately 40 hours of city inspector time at an hourly rate of $75 per hour. She has caused us to miss work for mandatory inspections, costing us approximately $2,000 in lost wages. She has forced us to pay additional inspection fees totaling $800. Sarah pulled out a calculator and started adding numbers. "But the real cost is emotional distress, harassment, defamation of character, and intentional interference with our peaceful enjoyment of our property. In civil court, these damages could be substantial." "How substantial?" I asked. "Given the scope and duration of her harassment, the malicious nature of her actions, and the need to send a strong message that this behavior will not be tolerated, I would estimate our damages at approximately $1 million. I nearly choked on my coffee. $1 million. "Corinne has been conducting a systematic campaign to destroy our quality of life," Sarah said matter-of-factly. "She has committed multiple crimes, wasted public resources, and caused significant emotional and financial harm to our family. $1 million judgment would be an appropriate punishment for this level of malicious behavior. Sarah closed the folders and looked at me with determination. Tomorrow morning, I am filing a comprehensive lawsuit against Corinne Mitchell for harassment, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, abuse of process, and conspiracy to commit crimes. I am also filing a formal complaint with the district attorney's office seeking criminal charges for misuse of emergency services. Are you sure about this? I asked. I mean, she is just one crazy neighbor. Sarah's expression became deadly serious. She is not just a crazy neighbor. She is a criminal who has been terrorizing our family for months. Yesterday, she used emergency services as a weapon to attack us during my mother-in-law's birthday party. She threatened to continue committing crimes until she got her way. This has to stop, and I am going to stop it. Over the next week, Sarah worked like a woman possessed. She filed motions, prepared subpoenas, and contacted every neighbor who had been harassed by Corinne over the years. She discovered that Corinne had driven away multiple families and had even been sued once before for similar behavior. The most satisfying moment came when Sarah served Corinne with the lawsuit. I watched from our front window as the process server knocked on Corinne's door and handed her the legal papers. Corinne opened the envelope, read the first page, and her face went completely white. $1 million in damages. Corinne had finally picked a fight with someone who knew how to fight back. Corinne's response to being sued was exactly what Sarah had predicted. Instead of retreating or trying to resolve the situation, Corinne doubled down and made her legal problems infinitely worse. 3 days after being served with our lawsuit, she filed a police report claiming that I had physically threatened her during one of our confrontations. The police detective who called me about Corinne's latest accusation sounded tired and annoyed. "Mr. Johnson, I need to ask you some questions about an incident that allegedly occurred between you and your neighbor, Corinne Mitchell." "What kind of incident?" I asked, though I already suspected where this was going. "She claims that you approached her car while she was parked on the street and made threatening gestures while yelling profanities at her." I felt a surge of anger at Corinne's latest lie, but then I remembered something that made me smile. "Detective, what date did she claim this happened?" "She says it was last Tuesday around 3 in the afternoon." "Detective, I was at work until 6 that day, and I have security footage from our home that shows no interaction between me and Corinne on Tuesday. Would you like me to provide that footage?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Yes, sir. I would very much like to see that footage." Within an hour, the detective was sitting in our living room watching our security system playback. The footage clearly showed that Corinne's story was completely fabricated. I had not even been home during the time she claimed I threatened her. "Mrs. Johnson," the detective said, turning to Sarah, "I understand you are an attorney." "Yes, I am," Sarah replied. "Your neighbor just filed a false police report. That is a felony in this state. I wanted to give you a heads up that we will be adding this to her growing list of criminal charges." As soon as the detective left, Sarah made a phone call that would change everything. She called the district attorney's office and spoke directly with the prosecutor handling Corinne's case. "My neighbor has now filed a demonstrably false police report in addition to her previous crimes," Sarah explained. "I have video evidence that completely contradicts her story. I think it is time to consider whether Corinne Mitchell is a danger to public safety." The next morning, 2 detectives and a patrol officer arrived at Corinne's house with a warrant for her arrest. I watched from my front window as they handcuffed her and put her in the back of a police car. The entire neighborhood came outside to witness Corinne's perp walk, and I felt a satisfaction that I had never experienced before. But Karen's arrest was just the beginning. The discovery process in our civil lawsuit revealed Reviled's true scope of her obsession with our family. Under court order, Karen had to turn over all of her photographs, videos, and documents related to her harassment campaign. What we discovered was disturbing beyond anything I had imagined. Karen had been stalking us for over a year. She had hundreds of photographs of Sarah and me in our backyard, some taken with telephoto lenses from considerable distances. She had detailed logs of our daily routines, nodding when we left for work, when we returned home, and when we had visitors. Most disturbing of all, Karen had been researching our personal information online. She had printed out Sarah's professional biography, articles about cases she had worked on, and even photographs from our social media accounts. She had created a detailed profile of our lives like a criminal planning a major crime. "This goes way beyond neighbor disputes," Sarah said as we reviewed the evidence with our attorney. "This is stalking behavior that could have escalated to violence if we had not stopped it." The evidence was so damning that Karen's attorney advised her to consider a settlement. During the first settlement conference, Karen's lawyer looked embarrassed to be representing her. "My client acknowledges that her behavior was inappropriate," the lawyer said carefully. "She is prepared to offer a formal apology and agree to have no further contact with your family." Sarah's response was swift and decisive. "Your client committed multiple felonies, stalked my family for over a year, and used emergency services as a weapon against us. An apology is not sufficient. We want full financial compensation for the damages she has caused, and we want a court order that will prevent her from ever harassing another neighbor again." The settlement negotiations revealed just how expensive Karen's obsession had become. Her legal fees were already over $50,000. She was facing criminal charges that could result in jail time and substantial fines. Her homeowner's insurance would not cover intentional criminal acts, so she was personally responsible for any civil judgment against her. Meanwhile, the HOA was facing its legal problems. Sarah had discovered that Karen had been filing false complaints and manipulating the board process for years. The HOA's insurance company was threatening to drop its coverage if it did not remove Karen from the board and implement new procedures to prevent future harassment. The most satisfying development came when several other neighbors who had been victimized by Karen joined our lawsuit. The elderly couple who had moved away because of Karen's harassment came back to testify about how she had destroyed their retirement dreams. The Martinez family provided evidence of Karen's systematic campaign against their teenage son. Even current neighbors testified about Karen's abusive behavior during HOA meetings. What had started as one crazy neighbor harassing us about our pool had become a federal case involving multiple criminal charges, civil rights violations, and a class action lawsuit representing every family Karen had terrorized over the years. But the most devastating blow to Karen came from an unexpected source. During the discovery process, we learned that Karen had been secretly recording her conversations with neighbors and city officials. She thought these recordings would support her case, but they provided clear evidence of her malicious intent and criminal planning. In one recording, Karen could be heard telling another neighbor, "I am going to make their lives so miserable that they will have no choice but to move away. I do not care if I have to call the police every day for the next year." In another recording, Karen laughed about wasting city inspector time and bragged about gaming the system to harass people she did not like. These recordings were the final nails in Karen's coffin. They proved beyond any doubt that her harassment was intentional, malicious, and criminal. The district attorney used them to upgrade her charges, and we used them to justify our $1 million damage claim. As we prepared for trial, Karen's legal situation became increasingly desperate. She was facing serious criminal charges, a massive civil judgment, and the destruction of her reputation in the community. Her evidence had convicted her, and there was no way out. The end came faster than anyone expected. 3 weeks before our civil trial was scheduled to begin, Karen's attorney called Sarah with a desperate plea for a settlement. Karen's legal bills had exceeded $100,000, and she was facing the possibility of spending 2 years in prison if convicted on all criminal charges. "My client wants to resolve this matter immediately," Karen's lawyer said during the conference call. "She is prepared to accept full responsibility for her actions and agree to whatever terms you require." Sarah's response was measured but firm. "Karen has put our family through hell for over a year. She has committed multiple crimes, wasted public resources, and caused significant financial and emotional damage. Any settlement must reflect the serious nature of her actions." The final settlement negotiation took place in the conference room of Sarah's law office. Karen sat across from us, looking like a broken woman. Gone was the aggressive, self-righteous neighbor who had terrorized our family. In her place was someone who finally understood the consequences of her actions. Karen's attorney presented the settlement offer. "My client agrees to pay $850,000 in damages, plus all of your legal fees and costs. She will also agree to a permanent restraining order prohibiting any contact with your family or any interference with your property. Additionally, she will make a formal public apology and resign from the HOA board immediately." I looked at Sarah, who maintained her poker face throughout the presentation. $850,000 was close to our original $1 million demand, and the other terms would ensure that Karen could never bother us again. "There is one more requirement," Sarah said calmly. "Karen must also agree to move out of the neighborhood within 6 months. Our family should not have to live in fear that she will resume her harassment campaign in the future." Karen's lawyer started to object, but Karen herself spoke up for the first time. "I agree," she said quietly. "I will move." The criminal charges were resolved as part of a plea agreement. Karen pleaded guilty to misuse of emergency services, filing false police reports, and criminal harassment. She received 2 years of probation, 800 hours of community service, and a $10,000 fine. Most importantly, she was prohibited from filing any complaints with city agencies without first getting approval from her probation officer. The day Karen signed the settlement agreement was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. As she handed over a cashier's check for $850,000, I thought about all the sleepless nights she had caused us, all the anxiety and stress she had put our family through, and all the other neighbors she had victimized over the years. "I want you to know that I never intended for things to go this far," Karen said as she prepared to leave the law office. Sarah's response was perfect. "The road to consequences is paved with intentions, Karen. You made deliberate choices to harass and torment our family. These consequences are exactly what you earned." The public apology was published in the neighborhood newsletter and posted on the HOA website. Karen admitted that her complaints about our pool were unfounded, that her harassment of our family was inexcusable, and that her actions had violated both civil and criminal laws. She also apologized to all the other neighbors she had harassed over the years. The HOA implemented new policies to prevent future harassment by board members. No single member could file complaints on behalf of the association, without approval from the full board. All complaints had to be based on documented violations of written rules, not personal preferences or aesthetic opinions. And most importantly, any board member who was convicted of harassment or abuse of process would be automatically removed from their position. Corinne moved out of the neighborhood 4 months later. I watched from my pool deck as the moving truck loaded up her belongings and drove away forever. Several neighbors came outside to witness her departure, and I could see the relief on their faces. The reign of terror was finally over. The best part of Corinne's downfall was watching how it changed the entire neighborhood dynamic. People started talking to each other again without fear of being reported for imaginary violations. Children could play outside without worrying about Corinne measuring their chalk drawings or timing their bicycle rides. The elderly couple who had moved away because of Corinne's harassment decided to move back to the neighborhood after learning she was gone. Our pool became the symbol of victory over neighborhood tyranny. We hosted a huge celebration party the weekend after Corinne moved out, and it felt like the entire neighborhood exhaled for the first time in years. My mother, who had been so traumatized by Corinne's 911 stunt during her birthday party, finally got to enjoy our pool the way it was meant to be enjoyed. But the most satisfying moment came 6 months after the settlement, when I received a letter from the city attorney's office. They had used our case as precedent to create new policies for handling chronic complainers who abuse municipal resources. Anyone who files more than 5 unfounded complaints in a single year would be flagged for investigation. Repeat offenders could be banned from filing complaints altogether and face criminal charges for abuse of process. Your case helped us protect other families from going through what you experienced, the city attorney wrote. Corinne Mitchell's harassment campaign will be used as a training example for our staff on how to identify and stop malicious abuse of the complaint system. Today, 3 years later, our pool is still the centerpiece of our backyard paradise. Sarah and I swim laps every morning before work, and we host pool parties throughout the summer without any fear of harassment or interference. The privacy fence that Corinne demanded we install was never built because it was never actually required. Our legal victory cost Corinne nearly $1 million when you add up the settlement, legal fees, criminal fines, and moving expenses. But the real cost to Corinne was much higher than money. She lost her home, her position of authority in the community, her reputation, and her sense of control over other people's lives. The $850,000 settlement allowed us to pay off our mortgage early and set up college funds for our future children. But more importantly, it sent a message that bullies cannot terrorize innocent families without facing serious consequences. Sometimes people ask me if I feel bad about what happened to Corinne. My answer is always the same. I feel bad that it took so long for her to face the consequences for her behavior. If she had been stopped earlier, maybe the other families she harassed would not have been forced to move away from their dream homes. Corinne Mitchell called 911 on our swimming pool because she thought she could abuse the system to get her way. She thought that being loud, aggressive, and persistent would force us to submit to her unreasonable demands. She thought that normal people would just give up rather than fight back against her harassment. Corinne was wrong about everything. She picked a fight with the wrong family at the wrong time and in the wrong way. My wife did not just defend our pool. She defended the principle that bullies should not be allowed to terrorize their neighbors without facing justice. The pool is still here. Corinne is not. And every time I dive into that crystal clear water, I remember that sometimes the good guys do win.